Men of different status in life, they come into marriage with different assets. Now, but there is one asset which is constant to every man, irrespective of your status in life. And that asset, strangely, which most of us never realize, is actually the most important asset that we bring into our marriage. And it's constant for every man, irrespective of whatever status in life that you're in. And tonight, we're going to discover that number one asset that you as a man bring into your marriage. Welcome once again to Saturday Night Conversation. This is the meetup for Christians who want to live intentional lives, and we basically come together so we can learn how to make Christ-focused decisions in different aspects of our life, in work, in family, in marriage, in relationships, in church. And the goal of everything is to help us be able to make Christ-focused decisions that celebrate God, so that, look, every one of us will be able to live a life that makes God happy, a life that really impacts God, the people around us, the way God wants it to be. Now, if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Tola with a dot under the O. My Nigerian friends call me Tola. So let's get straight into tonight's conversation. Thank you, Bode, for joining me. I can see you there. So let me set the stage for you. It's wedding day. The groom and the bride, they are in front of the preacher man. And the preacher man starts off saying, dearly beloved, we're gathered together in the presence of God to witness together the joining together, to witness today the joining together of this groom, this man and this woman in the holy estate of matrimony. Now, the institution of marriage is a sacred institution which should not be lightly taken into. Yeah, you're probably wondering, am I doing a wedding? No, I used to be an altar boy, so I had front row seat for a number of weddings, and that's the reason why I can still recite a number of this. But so you've got that whole marriage scene all set up for you, and then it gets to the point where both of them have to make individual vows. So at the point when the woman is making her vow, what is she saying? She's basically saying that, number one, I am committing to change my name, to change my surname to your surname, unless you probably live in some parts of Europe where the lady doesn't have to change her surname. Number two, the woman is committing that, look, I am basically changing my house address to wherever your house address is going to be, or whatever house address you basically choose. Now, the third thing which the woman at the point when she's making her vow is committing to is this. She's committing to the fact that the decision making and the control and the leadership of her life personally, she's bringing it under the leadership of the man. So really, the woman, as it were, at the point of that making her vow, there are so many things, as it were, that is already happening in the woman's life. Now, the question really is this: what is the woman holding on to, which forms the basis of why she's confident to make that vow? That one thing which the woman is holding on to is actually the most important asset that the man brings into the wedding, that the man brings into the marriage. You want to know what it is? It is the value of the man's word. I repeat, the most important value, the most important asset that a man brings into a marriage is the value of his word. And at the point of making the vow, what the woman is basically saying is that, look, I believe in the value of your word, that because you are committing your life to me, I believe in the value of your word, and because of that, I am making my vow. So let's go a bit into the traditional vows. I know there are different versions of vows, but one of the reasons why I like the traditional vows, which have been said in most churches, is because that vow, to a large extent, is very closely resembles the mind and the thinking of what Scripture has in Ephesians chapter 5, reading from verse 25. And the vow basically goes like this: I, Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, take you, Pepper Potts, to be my lawfully wedded wife, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to hold, to love, and to cherish from this day forth and as long as we shall both live. I know a number of people don't like richer for poorer, so they change it for richer for richer. Honestly, I think that's being childish, because what you are basically doing is you are giving your word of commitment. So let's look at it from the perspective of the guy who is giving that commitment. At the point when you are making your commitment as a guy, the only thing which your wife or the bride has to hold on to is the value of your word. That as you are making that commitment, that there is value in the words that you are saying. That you're not just saying words into an empty space. And the point is that most of us don't realize that the value of that asset depreciates or appreciates depending on what we do when we are in the marriage. I repeat, the value of our word appreciates or depreciates depending on what we do while we're in the marriage. So for example, you are in the marriage and you have developed a habit of when you make promises, you don't keep your promises, no matter how baseline it is. It could be as simple as telling your wife that, look, I'm going to be home by 5 p.m. What you have done is you have committed your word. You have committed your word to your wife. I'm going to be home by 5 p.m. Unless something happens, something drastic happens, that's the only reason why she should not believe that you will keep that word that you have given. Which unfortunately is the case that happens in so many of us, whereby, maybe not so many of us, a few of us, I like to say a few of us, because I've seen most of you guys are guys that basically keep your word. So it happens that little by little, we start chipping on our word. For example, we make commitments which we never hold on to. And by virtue of us, let me use the word, not keeping those commitments, the value of our word starts getting eroded as men. And you now start finding out that, look, it gets to a point whereby you now become unbelievable to members of your family. And one of the things you don't realize is that the value of your word is one asset that allows your family to be able to experience the fatherhood of God. Look, the value of a man is one of the things that we as fathers, as husbands, can use to show our wives that God is faithful. If we can be people that keep our word, our wives will learn to understand that, look, God is a God that keeps his word. Our children will be able to understand and appreciate the faithfulness of God. And it could be, like I said, it could be, we chip at the value of our words in simple everyday decisions. It doesn't have to be something big or dramatic, but little by little, we start chipping on our words, little by little. There was something that happened in my marriage early when we first got married. There was a day in which my wife had been hanging out with a couple of older married women, which is very good. It's good. Bible encourages that older women should train younger women. So she had been hanging out with them. And then I went to pick her up and we're going home. And then I think maybe a follow through of some of the conversations they had been having, she just asked me out of the blue that, is there ever going to be a reason why you end up being physically intimate with someone else other than me? Guess what I did? Actually, I was a bit dramatic, you understand, in terms of my response. I actually started crying. And my wife was like, why are you crying? And I told her, I said, you're basically telling me that, look, I am going to have a reason not to keep my word to you. Because for me, the way I understood was that, look, I have given you my word. My word should not be dependent on what happens. Thank you very much, Bolale, for joining in. Funke, thank you very much for joining in. My word should not be dependent on what happens. My word should not be dependent on circumstances or situations. That is the value of what a man brings into the marriage. When you can let your family, your wife, believe that that word that you have given is a word that stands irrespective of whatever happens. A few years back, I had a guy who called me. He was having a bit of issues in his marriage, and he told me so many things, the things he had been doing to try and make the marriage work, and what was happening that, as it were, his wife was not doing to help the marriage work. And then after he finished telling me all this, guess what I told him? I told him, so what? I think the first thing he was probably expecting that I was going to tell him is that, look, man, how can your wife be doing this with everything? Because let me tell you, one of the things that had become so bad in the marriage was that they had not been physically intimate for, I think, about 8 months. And this was the marriage which was definitely less than 2 years. They were probably a little over a year or so. And the first thing I had to abuse from his mind is the fact that, look, because you have been, let me use the word, keeping your word as a man, that does not obligate your wife. Do you understand? Simply because you have been keeping your word as a man, that doesn't mean that, that means your wife too has an obligation to keep her word. No, you keep your word as a man because you gave your word to your wife and to God. It's as pretty simple as that. You gave your word to God and to your wife, and you are going to keep it irrespective of the circumstances and situations. Yes, myself and the guy, we first went through that first aspect of him realizing that, look, there is nothing that you have done that is special. What you have done is what is required of a man that keeps his word. And after we had settled that, then we now started moving into practical solutions in terms of, okay, what are the things which you can do to help the family? What are the things which you can do to address the situation? But the first thing that is most important, that should be paramount in the minds of all of us, is that, look, the number one asset we bring into a family is the value of our word. Our word should be believable by our spouses. Our word should be believable by our kids. And there are 4 levels of intimacy within a marriage. There's physical intimacy, there's emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, and spiritual intimacy. And when you begin to start behaving like a man whose word cannot be relied on, you start chipping on all these levels of intimacy, depending. It could start from whichever one of them, but let me tell you, you start chipping on all the levels of intimacy. I'm going to repeat the levels of intimacy I mentioned: physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, and emotional intimacy. You begin to chip at them little by little. But I believe that, look, for those of us that have come together today to actually listen to this word, we will be men whose words can be relied upon by our spouses. It doesn't mean that we're going to do everything which our spouses hope to do immediately, but our words will have so much value that if we tell our spouses that, look, we're going to do it, even if there's no definite date that is set in time, our spouses should be able to believe that word, should be able to believe that commitment that we have said that, look, we're going to do it. And that is the value of a man's word. And let me just tell you, to be a man that keeps his word, it's not in the big and grand things, it's in small things. For example, like I said, it could be as simple as, I'm going to be home by so and so time. Pretty simple as that. And your wife should be able to believe that. Your wife should be able to go to sleep that, look, I'm going to go to bed at this particular point in time. One of the things I had to learn in terms of the value of my word, especially when one of my kids was still younger, was that if we ever told him we're going to do something for him, I am in trouble if I don't do it. Because there's nothing else he's thinking about. He's basically going to be asking me for as long as he can remember. Keep on asking me that, look, this thing you promised, when are you going to do it? And so, let me use the word, my son taught me by his let me use the word, constant follow-up, the need for me to be a man who keeps my promise, such that my son gets assurance, the fact that, look, if daddy says he's going to do this, then daddy is going to do this. So, guys, tonight's conversation is all about the number one asset that we bring into our marriages. It is the value of our word. Let's be men that keep our word. Let's be men that our wives can rely on our word no matter the season of life, and can trust that we will do whatever it is that we have said. That the vow that we made on the day of our wedding, that we're going to keep them in sickness, in health, richer for poorer, until death do us part. Let them live every day knowing that they have a husband that is doing that consistently for them. Thank you very much once again. Like I said, we meet, for those of you who are finding me for the first time, we meet every Saturday. The time is 8 p.m. GMT +1, and the conversations are usually straightforward. We try to focus on just one area of life that we get to make a decision on. So we keep it very short. Usually doesn't go beyond 15 minutes at most. There are rare conversations that, because of the nature of the conversation, we push it as much as 20 minutes, but I don't think it's gone past much of that. So that's the end of tonight's conversation. Once again, I thank everybody for joining us, and for those of us who's going to be watching it, if you have questions, you want things you want me to clarify, you can just leave a comment, give a comment down, and I'm going to check it and respond to you. I want to wish you an enjoyable weekend for the rest of the day, and I want to wish you a lovely time in fellowship in church tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a good evening.